Yeah, so thank you all so much for coming. I know some of you have travelled super far, so we really appreciate that. And like Alicia says, I'm a Conduit member, and I'm a huge supporter of everything that this space stands for, because it brings so many backgrounds together, and it's so great to have different expertise and sectors to cross-pollinate, to innovate and collaborate. And I'm actually a vet by trade, and I've always been really interested in the power of the human-animal bond, whether it's in food security and livelihoods, whether it's in conservation, and also more recently, the power that that has for people living on the street as well. And that's why you're all here, because you're all also interested in this subject, and it's something that's close to so many of your hearts. And our guest speakers and facilitators tonight really showcase that diversity and collaboration. We've got a hairdresser in Josh Coombes, we've got a vet in Jade Statt, and we've also got a tech entrepreneur in Alex from Beam as well. And I'm also looking out on a sea of people who I can see are in healthcare, charity, tech, political people, sports personalities, property developers, investors, loads, artists. It's brilliant. But regardless of what we all do, we're all just human, aren't we? And that's the same with every individual who experiences homelessness as well. So I really want us to remember that. And each of our speakers will share their now kind of viral kind of impact, whether it's Josh Coombes with Do Something for Nothing, whether it's the hundreds of veterinary volunteers with StreetVet, or whether it's almost 1,000 people that Beam have helped place into stable jobs and homes as well. So you'll be hearing from them very, very shortly. And I want you to start to think about the questions that they're going to bring up to you as well. How can we create more urgency to alleviate homelessness? How can we make hostels more inclusive? And how can we get companies to hire and help disadvantaged talent? So I really want you to share, to listen, to connect, and to get curious, because I believe in this room there's the power to have some real paradigm shifts when it comes to collaboration. So let's welcome our scene setter, and Josh will help us bring it back to the human. He really does amplify voices from the street of homeless people around the world, because it's incredible what you share with your hairdresser.
Thank you. Cheers, mate. Thank you. Thanks so much, Ebony. I appreciate it. And yeah, thanks to the Conduit. Thanks for having us. I'm happy to be here and to talk to you a little bit about what I've been up to for, I guess, the last 6 years or so now. I've got, how long, you're going to keep time for me, huh? Because the struggle with these things is that, like, yeah. So yeah, look, I think most of us will live in London here, pretty much, everybody. We know what it's like, let's be honest, to cut to it, to walk by people who are experiencing homelessness in this city, and some of the feelings that confront us in those moments. For me, I think for most of my life, I was quite curious as far as why people might end up in this situation, but I never had all that much in the way of a touch point to really have interactions that were more than just buying someone a cup of tea, buying somebody a sandwich, dropping a few coins in someone's cup. And those are all great things to do in the moment, in like the 2-3 minutes you might have, or, you know, even just a few seconds just to say, you know, like, yes, I do have some change, or no, but I always walked away sort of feeling like I wanted to know more about someone's story, and reading articles and the way this is portrayed a lot of the time, at least in the mainstream media, through news and, you know, whatever I was viewing online, it was always kind of statistics and, yes, this thing's rising, and I was always very overwhelmed, I think, just to see like the way this is clearly having an impact on more and more people each year. And you know, I used to sort of parallel my life to other people's when I'd see someone who was, say, my age, and I'd think like, okay, well, you know, what's really happening in this person's life? They're clearly on their own on the street, sleeping outside. And you know, I found a way to get beneath the surface, and it came quite unexpectedly, to be honest, which was my job as a hairdresser when I was working in a salon. I obviously was a people person. You can't, you know, work as a hairdresser without enjoying your job. And my clients in front of me, I was aware that my role sometimes would be more than just how's the weather, chit chat, and you know, making someone feel good as far as like giving them the mirror in the end and that transaction of money. You know, people would come to me sometimes with their problems, and it might be a transitional moment in someone's life where someone's going through something, or maybe lost somebody, or something more positive like a new job or a new chapter starting for them. But I'd never really thought of this thing that I did each day in the salon as something I could go out and use to connect with people. And one day I had my bag with me. I'd go outside of work sometimes and I'd cut people's hair to make a bit of extra pocket money, like I'd, go and do a couple of home visits each week. And I was on the way to this lady's hair, my friend, and I was going to cut her hair that evening. She'd become like a close client of mine. And I didn't end up making it there because I saw someone who was living on the street at the time and had a chat with them, and that turned into me offering them a haircut. And I'm glad I didn't have that much time to sort of let that internal dialogue get in the way of whether this would be top priority of someone's needs. Because let's be honest, when you're looking for somewhere to sleep each night, or you're, a whole host of different things you might be worried about in that moment, a fresh haircut probably won't be one of them. But actually, this person said yes, and in that moment, a couple of things happened for me in a way that's really like changed my life. And that may sound quite grandiose or extreme, but actually, bear with me. So the first thing I think was my whole idea of how I'd been thinking about this changed completely, because I was thinking about this as like, how as one person can I begin to make an impact in this? I was looking at this as this kind of this great big thing that felt, as I said before, like completely overwhelming. And when I was cutting this person's hair, I realized I overlooked probably the most important thing I do have to give a person, which is my time to sit down and listen to someone. Like, we all know what it's like when we're in a bad place in our life. We all know what it's like when we might have something going on that we, when we kind of get stuck in that kind of perpetual cycle of our own mind, it can get dark in there, and sometimes just one person giving you another vantage point on that, okay, it doesn't fix everything, but it's helpful, and listening to your problems, listening to how you're doing. And this first person, I really recognized that really meant something to them. And of course, when I handed them the mirror at the end too, it was a nice piece for confidence, for dignity. It was like a way to make someone actually physically feel like they felt good about themselves. And he was really charismatic and started showing his new look to people walking by. And like, I saw how even in a busy city like London, where we can get, quite a bad rep sometimes for not having enough time, and everyone's on their, little mouse trail following their day and doing our thing. And look, we get really busy with our own lives, but I saw the way that it kind of opened up this door to everyone else, and somebody who was invisible like minutes before, suddenly it seemed like there was a spotlight on them, and people would stop and want to know what's going on. And by the end of the haircut, this person also had like a meal bought for them, and someone even offered them to buy them like a new coat, I remember. And it was just this kind of action that was really small, but I saw how powerful that was just as a statement to make someone visible too. So there was the personal transition in me and the recognition of what I can do rather than just focusing on the things I can't, which I think is a really important thing to lift, the shackles of feeling like I don't know whether you guys feel the same, but bloody hell, I can feel fatigued sometimes when you're looking and just doomsday scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or whatever it may be. You don't get those feelings of like, I want to get off the sofa and feel active and really do something about this. For me personally, it can feel like numbing sometimes and really kind of keep me sat down where I am. So it was that kind of releasing of that side of recognizing what I can do, but also it was so important listening to this person's story that I continue to want to do this more. And I started to go out and do this on my day off. I'd go out and do it in the evenings when I had the time. Over the next few months, I'd do this more and more, and within a few months, I'd met people through, no fault of their own, usually had, for whatever reason, fallen on really hard times. And when I say no fault of their own, usually, I mean, even if it was their fault and people have made mistakes or bad choices, Christ, I've made so many of those in my own life. I'm sure you guys might be the same, but thankfully, I've had people who've stuck in my corner through those moments, thick and thin, unconditionally, like a couple of people who've just been like rocks in my life. And the safety net that I have, thankfully too as well, looks like quite a few people I might be able to go and rely on, to be able to go and knock on their door and see if they can look after me for a bit before I fall to like the street and that level and having to look for like the next place that I might need to stay. at night. You know, I can't even imagine the idea of like walking around the city tonight and thinking, right, what corner am I gonna sleep in? So yeah, there's obviously a lot of different things going on here, but I'm aware of time, and like fast forward with my journey, thanks. Fast forward with like why I'm sitting here, and like I suppose what's really important about the work that I do and where it's led me now is, yeah, telling stories around this isn't enough to make the change or the dent in this that I want to see, you know? I don't believe it's normal, and it has been normalized to walk around a city like London and see the amount of people who are struggling, see the amount of people who've fallen through the cracks. It has been normalized because I sometimes have to wake myself up from that and realize that like, this is not okay, and like, it doesn't have to be this way. But what stories do is they give us the chance to be able to reset and recalibrate and kind of look at one person who's in front of us, which is the way I tell stories usually with consent on Instagram and now in a book as well of lots of different men and women I've met. It gives us a chance to tell a new story about something that I think often we are told the wrong story about. There's so many negative stigmas surrounding this issue. Not enough time to talk about the big ones, drugs, addiction, and obviously the mental health conversation. But oh look, I set my own timer. Wasn't that good of me? I thought that was yours then. I was like, bloody hell, did you have to set a timer for me? And I'm like, I set it for myself. That's like, so all right, that's my warning, but what I want to do to wrap up is just say that like really why I'm up here today is like the best people I've met in my entire life have been the conversations I've had out here, whether it be in London or many different cities I've traveled to now. Sometimes I cut hair for people, sometimes I don't, but when I do, sometimes that's turned into like a relationship that's lasted into today, friendships with people I know who maybe now have got themselves in a better situation. But there's a lot of layers to this stuff, and we've got to get better at seeing ourselves in one another through those layers, underneath the surface. Because like, I'd love for all of you guys to have a think, and this isn't a negative thing, it's just real talk, hopefully. Like, think of like your ugliest moment, the one you're really not proud of. I can think of mine, and I'm like, God, like, I'm glad most of those happened, not with the whole of like the world seeing them. And I know that sometimes they happen behind closed doors, or times I've just been in a difficult position, but a lot of the time when you're outside, like it's theater to like the rest of the world, and these unflattering kind of views of how we see this from the outside, I just think we've got to get better at kind of recognizing that yes, there's a surface to this stuff. Yes, sometimes it can look like all kinds of different things, but there's a human being there. And I don't want to live in a place where what help looks like at the moment and like the safety net that we provide for people as a society looks the way it does now. I believe in more holistic care. That starts with mental health. That starts with, yeah, the really small things, bringing it back to basics. So yeah, I'd love for you guys to think about that. I've got a table at the back here, which is kind of addressing some of those questions, which is like the myths and the stigmas. And I'm going to be at that table later on to sort of hopefully, yeah, talk a bit more about that and maybe sort of have some ideas. I'd love to hear your thoughts and have a bit of a chat. I'm now going to pass it on to my gorgeous friend Jade over here. Jade, as just a quick introduction, yeah, come on in. When I started, what I do now is called Do Something for Nothing, by the way. I didn't mention that bit. I'm not very good at all that stuff, talking about what it is I actually do and promoting it. But Jade is like, she's somebody who got involved in this from the start. She's a vet. She was working in a practice at the time, and sent me an email when I was first posting these stories, and we met up in central London. A lot of people have animals who are on the street, dogs who they dearly love, who are amazing companions to them, and you started coming out with me, and we went out together, and now you're doing what you do now, and I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, hi. I'm going to have to cut a bit out of my speech now that Josh just covered. I know. So, yeah, wouldn't the world be a better place if everyone had the ability to love as unconditionally as a dog? Yes. Thanks, Ebs. How many people here share their life with a pet? So I'm going, okay, that makes me very happy. It means you're hopefully, sorry, Ebony, going to empathise with my street vet journey. So, it all started with a chocolate Labrador called Oakley. So I graduated from Glasgow Vet School in 2002, and my first boss, to get me, I think, as an incentive to take the job, offered to buy me a chocolate Labrador puppy. You don't get bosses like that anymore. So Oakley was with me through everything. So my first nail-biting night on call, to me, moving house, quite a few relationships, and 3 severe episodes of depression. He was my constant, my guide dog for life. And in 2016, I found out Oakley had cancer. And despite the fact that I'm a vet and I've got qualifications and I can, I think I must have phoned 10 oncologists to get their advice, I knew that I couldn't save him. And I felt helpless. And it was around that time that I went out on a night out in London, and I had a chance encounter with a homeless gentleman called Dave and his dog Brick. Brick was a staffy. He was like enormous, boisterous, but he had sore skin. Nothing dramatic, he just had sore skin. He was itchy and it was a bit red. And as Dave and I talked dogs, I was really struck by how anxious he was about how he was going to access veterinary care for his best friend. And I walked away and I just kept thinking, what would I have done if this was Oakley? And I was really frustrated because I knew if I had what I needed in my bag, I could have helped him. And I was determined, and that was my catalyst for starting Street Vet. So the next sort of step in that journey, that's what this is, it was you. So the next step in my journey, I heard about this guy, some of you might have heard of him, called Josh Coombes, and he had a movement called Do Something for Nothing. So he was basically asking people to give their skills back on the street. So I sent him an email, we met for a coffee, and I just said, I want to do what you do. And by December 2016, we were outreaching together. So Josh was cutting hair. I did have a go at cutting some hair. It did not go well. And I was treating the dogs. So it became really clear to me at that point there was an absolute need for this service. But overwhelmingly, and I'm so thankful for it, there was this great will from my veterinary profession to help me provide it. I then met my co-founder, Sam Joseph. So he's another vet with a shared vision. And what started as 2 vets in a backpack in 2016, we're now a registered charity, and we're fueled by over 400 volunteer vets and nurses who outreach, offering free accessible vet care to pets belonging to those experiencing homelessness in 17 locations across the UK. So how does it work? What do we do? So we basically swapped the practice for the pavements, and ultimately anything that can be done in a consulting room, Street Vet can do on the street. So we microchip, we vaccinate, we flea, we worm, we take blood, we test urine. But sometimes, and Josh has alluded to this, the most important thing we can do is just sit and listen. So it was from there, this is where I keep doing this to myself. Yeah. So we try and do as much as we possibly can on the street. And if we aren't able to, so if that pet needs to be hospitalized or it needs to have surgery or more diagnostics, we then fund them to go into a practice. And we work with like a big network of practices now that we collaborate with. But building trust is absolutely key. And so before we set up a new Street Vet location, what we'll do is get in touch with, other grassroots organizations, and we basically have an extension of their trust. So it's about being visible, being consistent, and being reliable, and it takes time. It takes time for you to earn people's trust. I've been a vet for 20 years. I hate saying that. And in all that time, the most profound relationships that I have had the privilege to witness, they've all been through Street Vet. So this is a Street Vet client, Mick. talking about his dog Benson. If I was separated from my dog, it would kill me. I have had no mental health support since 2014. My dog is my main mental health support. I would rather die in this pandemic than be separated from my dog. This one is a street vet client, Andy, talking about his dog Bailey. When you're stood there hungry and people are walking by like you don't exist, my dog gives me a roll. It's like having another heartbeat that's on your side. He's all the family I've got. He's my moral support. He's everything. So, although the words are different, the sentiment's the same. Companion animals are able to help make a really difficult life worth living. In a lonely and often brutal world, pets of those experiencing homelessness offer them companionship, security, warmth, but more importantly, unconditional and non-judgmental love. Our dogs, they provide, well, our pets really, they provide a sense of routine. They provide them with a role, identity, and for so many people, they give them a reason to live. The pets are often a link to happier times because a lot of our clients actually had their pets in their life before they were experiencing homelessness. And our clients often refer to their pets as their family, and I have no doubt that pet ownership helps to enhance their social, physical, and emotional health. So, it's also been shown, and I find this really interesting, that pet ownership for those experiencing homelessness actually reduces antisocial behaviour, so criminality, substance abuse, because our owners do not want to go to prison, because that means they will be forced to be separated from their pet. So we've talked about the benefits, but we haven't talked about the costs that people who are experiencing homelessness appreciate from having a pet. And when I started Street Vet, had no idea about this, the barriers that existed. And the barriers that exist are sometimes they can't access a soup kitchen. Sometimes they can't access services. They won't go to hospital because they won't leave their pet. And the biggest one is a hostel. Imagine if you were asked to choose between a roof over your head or your pet. I can't imagine being asked to do that. But with only 10% of hostels in the UK accepting pets, it is a choice being asked of Street Vet's clients every single day. And it was the gravity of this, that having a pet was perpetuating homelessness, that made me want to create and launch the Street Vet Accredited Hostel Scheme. So we launched the Street Vet Accredited Hostel Scheme, which is basically aimed at providing like 360 wraparound support for hostels. So we give them veterinary support, we give them pet essentials, transport, training, education, and we are trying to make it as easy as possible for hostels to say yes to pets. Our mission is to support our clients and their pets and to keep them together wherever possible. So I'm just going to leave you with one sort of thought from a client experiencing homelessness, which I think sums up the essence of Street Vet and why we do what we do. My dog is my home.
Thank you, Jade. Amazing. And we now have Alex to join us from Beam, which has put almost 1,000 individuals into stable work and stable homes. And it's incredible to see the power of collaboration in his organisation across governments, crowdfunding, and so much more.
Thank you very much for having me. And it's a very, very tough gig to try and follow Jade and Josh. I'm just going to fire this up and let's see if we can get this working. Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm sure we've all seen lots of movies that start in kind of, the Hollywood Hills or Parisian boulevards. My story starts somewhere, some people would say is a little less glamorous. I disagree living there, but it's Archway. Yeah, Archway. So that's my local tube station, Archway in North London. And I was walking out of this tube station just over 4 years ago, and I met eyes with a man who would always sit on the steps outside that tube station. And truth be told, I'd walked past this man and ignored him probably dozens of times. But that day, I stopped, we spoke. I remember the first thing he told me was that there was CCTV. And that was why he was sitting there, because that was keeping him safe. Because without that CCTV, he was afraid of being beaten up. And that was an amazing moment, or a powerful moment at least, because I realized that my experience of this environment was just so profoundly different to this man's. His vulnerability was just so significant compared to my own. And he also told me that he'd been out of work as long as he could remember. An Irish guy in his 40s, big bushy beard. And we became friends. I would stop and chat, and we would catch up. I would bring him cups of coffee. When it was getting cold, I would bring him pairs of socks. And then one day, he just disappeared. 6, 7 weeks passed, no sign of him. And then suddenly he reappears. But I barely recognize him. He looks maybe 10 or 15 years older, and his beard has been shaved off. And I go up to him and I say, "What's happened? Where have you been?" And he goes, "Been in hospital. Had a heart attack." And as he said that, he was literally sat on the same square foot of concrete step where I first met him. And so we spoke, and I walk home to my flat, and I'm of course so painfully aware that not only have I not helped this guy, he's in a worse position than when we first met. He's gone backwards. And so as I'm walking home, I think, what could I have done? What should I have done to have actually made a meaningful difference to this man's life? Clearly, it wasn't a pair of socks, wasn't a cup of coffee. Clearly, it was support, confidence, and ultimately a job. So he had money in his pocket to buy himself the coffees, the socks, the 100 other things that we all need in our day-to-day lives. I thought, well, that's going to cost more than a few quid, but what if we all chip in? What if we could use a technology like crowdfunding to smartly invest in people's futures? But I knew nothing about homelessness. So I spent about 6 months talking to people running homelessness organizations, people working in homelessness organizations, and people experiencing homelessness. People in temporary accommodation, people sofa surfing, people on the streets, all kinds of people. And one of these organizations said to me, "This is an interesting idea. You should go and meet Tony." I said, "Who's Tony?" She says, "Oh, he's a guy, lives in a homeless hostel. He wants to be an electrician." I go, "Okay." So I head down to his hostel. I'm sat across a table from a man called Tony. He's been out of work 22 years. He spent a lot of his life in prison. He's been an alcoholic. He's been a drug addict. He's estranged from almost all of his family. And it won't surprise you to hear he's not in great shape. And so I kind of bound in with my naive enthusiasm. I say, "My name's Alex. I want to start an organization where we crowdfund support for people and support them into jobs. And maybe you could use this new website to crowdfund everything you need to become an electrician. What do you say?" And truth is, Tony said pretty much nothing that entire meeting that must have gone on about 90 minutes. Apart from one time, I'll never forget, he says to me, "I don't understand." I go, "What don't you understand?" He goes, "I don't understand. Why would anyone help me?" And the question totally floors me, and I just say, "Do you know what? I don't know that they will, and I'm not going to promise what other people are going to do, but I think there are a lot of people out there who do want to help. And if we make it easy for them to help you, we will see the true love and compassion that exists in the world." And so me and my friend, We build a little website. We then need to raise the money that Tony needs to become an electrician to get his training. And I start picking up the phone and calling some journalists. And this is the first story that hits the press. Meet a homeless Londoner who's using crowdfunding to turn his life around. It's in Time Out. And then it gets picked up by the BBC, by The Guardian, by The Independent, by Sky News, by Reuters. He's covered literally all over the world. I think there's about 10 or 15 non-UK news outlets. This is just a man, tragically, like so many hundreds of thousands, who becomes a global news story. And that told me that people are looking for a solution to something they feel so powerless about. And then what happened after that? Tony went to his electrician training. He got his City and Guilds qualification. He got a job working on a building site in London. He started earning good money. He moved into his own home. He was reunited with his family. 6 months later, his life was radically transformed for the better. And I thought, that's really great. But it's only one person. There's a lot more people out there that need help. What if we could do this like 100 times? What if we could do this like thousands of times or even millions of times? Maybe society would look totally different and be radically fairer. Well, we haven't yet supported millions of people, but I do believe we'll get there one day. This is where we are today. We've supported 788 people into jobs and homes. And here you can see those individuals transparently on our website. Akito becoming a security guard, Mardzena becoming a beautician. Sometimes, as you can see, there are avatars used. That's typically because there are particular risk issues. Typically, those individuals are living in women's refuges and have been victims of domestic abuse. Kitchen assistants, retail assistants, support workers, warehouse, all kinds of different wonderful jobs contributing to society in all kinds of fantastic ways. So I could scroll down for quite a few minutes, but that would probably make for a slightly boring next few minutes. But I'm going to tell you briefly about Adam, who I've just found here. Adam I actually remember because he was one of the people that used Beam in the first year or so. He started work as a bricklayer. And this is what a campaign looks like. Now, all of these individuals are referred to us by charities or they're referred to us by local authorities. Caseworker fills in a form, it's really simple. There's a story section on each person's campaign. This is a place for the individual themselves to tell their own story. And I was really relating a lot to what Josh was saying, because we need to change narratives. We need to give people platforms, we need to let them hold the mic. And this is our way of doing that on the internet. And a lot of people have been reading these stories and it's been changing their perceptions of homelessness. Here are the updates. People can post updates either with their caseworker at Beam or via their smartphone themselves, and people can encourage each other. So this is Adam outside his new home. This is Adam. I was invited to Glasgow by someone he met on his bricklaying course. There's him doing bricklaying and so on. So you can see that there's just a huge amount of storytelling here. People are able to share the journey out of homelessness with people they're supporting. And after these individuals are referred by local authorities or charities, we give them a caseworker. That caseworker works with them to put together a plan. We work out the financial barriers to that plan. We show those financial barriers transparently here on the website. They even link to exactly what we're purchasing. People can people can send messages when they donate. It's so powerful, because so often when people join us and when we meet them, they've just had all sense of self-worth kicked out of them, unfortunately, by the system, by experiences, and they're very damaged people, and they've forgotten that their life has value. And their life does have value. And when 250 people on average fund their campaigns and 100 or so people on average send them a little message, for Rosemary Moon or for Joy Clark or Tracy Crosby, that's a couple of minutes. But for people like Adam, that's something they often cherish their whole life. Here is a page on our website where we're super transparent about our data, our impact. It would take too long to show you all of this stuff, but there's a lot of information here. If you're interested in Beam, do check it out. We also provide a lot of transparency on a per-person basis. So if you support people through Beam, and I would be super grateful if people are interested, if you do go to beam.org and support people through the platform, you get transparent data on how those individuals are getting on. So here Seb can see that 62 people have started work that he's supported, and obviously you can dig in and you can learn more about them. And finally, two very quick stories. That was loud in case anyone's asleep. Davina, I remember we met Davina when she had to abandon university because she was going through some very traumatic things. She told us she wanted to be an accountant. She was a very driven young woman. She'd been through some really difficult abusive things, and she went and fulfilled that ambition. And that really stayed with me, because there are people around us and around her who were saying, that's crazy, that can't be done. Someone who's homeless without all the qualifications and the education and this and that and whatever, she's not going to be able to become an accountant. Well, she called bullshit on that narrative. And then this is another quick story. The first homeless hostel was where I met Tony. The second homeless hostel, I met this guy. And I explained how Beam worked. And he goes, this is kind of interesting, but it's not for me. I say, why not? He says, oh, I'm smoking weed every day. I say, oh, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably not for you. How long have you been smoking weed? He goes, years. I go, well, look, you seem like a really great guy. So if you could just get clean, then we would love to work with you. And I reckon we could really help you. So I worked at that homeless hostel, never expected to hear from this guy again. 6 months later, he gets in touch. He's got clean. He says, I want to get into construction. So we funded his training. He became a digger operator. And that is him in his JCB there. And that stayed with me, because at the end of the day, all it took was one conversation. And for me to give him some kernel of hope. And that is ultimately what our platform is doing. Its product to the people we serve is fundamentally hope. It's that little spark, it's that little hot ember of hope. And then people like you out there, they blow into a raging inferno, and that raging inferno is an amazing new life for them and their family and their loved ones. So thank you very much for listening. I will shut up now and pass the microphone back and on with the evening. Thank you.